Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode with Deryn, our very amazing guest today. How are you doing, Deryn?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Manny?
I'm great. Is that how we pronounce your name? It's Deryn, right?
That's right.
And today, for
Yep.
professional reasons, we're not going to show your video, which is absolutely fine, and we respect that and understand that. And we
Thank
spoke a
you.
while back, and you've been on this journey, the twin flame journey, for how long now?
It's actually about a year from now.
So you're a third waver going fast and strong. And when we spoke last, obviously we're going through the dark night and now you're doing much better. So we'll delve into your journey. But you also provide lots of really amazing services. What services do you provide?
I'm a shadow work coach. So I'm trained as a counselor. I've trained in humanistic and psychodynamic counseling, and I got my master's in integrated counseling. And I primarily work on shadow work, which focuses on feelings and unconscious aspects of us, which were created in our childhood.
And we're going to we're going to delve deep into the shadow work aspect because that's essentially what comes up for twin flames, right? And that's what the divine masculine tends to go into a lot as well.
We both do.
Okay, so I'm really interested to hear more about that. And if people want to contact you, we'll put it all in the description as well. If they want to contact you, they can contact you via TikTok, and that's Self-Worth, right?
Self-worth, that's right.
And then you've also got an email address, which is I'm going to put in the description. But what's your email address?
Deryn Cole at btinternet.com.
Okay, wonderful. So let's begin from the start. Let's go into your background, anything you want to share about, your childhood, your journey. Like, how did you go from where you were to being this shadow work coach, counselor, twin flame, individual? What's the journey been like for you?
Gosh, a synopsis of my life. That's interesting. Well, I started off with parents who were completely in their ego, or their shadow, if you like. They were sort of B-list celebrities. My mother sang with Frank Sinatra and dated JFK. And I'm not name dropping, I'm saying it because I'm showing that my parents were very much of the external world. My father, he made the Goldfinger in the Goldfinger movie, and he was an actor. So they were very much of the external world. And parents like that, because of their own shadow stuff, of their own unconscious aspects, they're not really the greatest parents, if you like, to really bring up a child and consider the child's feelings. So I had a very, very traumatic childhood.
Was there a lot of pressure to do
My mom,
well and succeed as well then?
I didn't really get pressure to. Yeah, I did get pressure to succeed. My father, I was always a disappointment to my father, because I wasn't as amazing as he was. But I think my major trauma was with my mother, who should have probably been diagnosed with manic depression, and she was very, very, very dark. I had, as I said, a very, very traumatic childhood. She gave me dogs and puppies, and if I had behaved incorrectly, she'd put the dog down. It was very, very traumatic. It happened again and again. The emotional abuse, the lack of validating who I was, the mental torture, the emotional abuse, the physical abuse was absolutely horrendous. And people would say to me later on, when I was in my teens, how did you even get through that? So it was very, very dark. So I think a lot of us who are on this journey can associate with that. A lot of us on this have had very traumatic childhoods.
So how did you manage?
Pardon?
How did you manage to get through that as a child?
I think you just do. You just don't know anything other. And I think I've got an incredibly strong spirit. And I think a lot of us like this are very strong spirited. It's who we are by essence.
And then were you an
I got through it, but I was quite dysfunctional.
were you an
And I
only
went into
child?
I was an only child. That's right. Yeah. So nobody else around. But I was very sociable. And going into my teens and 20s, I was an incredibly sociable person. And I was right out there in the world doing everything that everyone does. I was partying a lot. I drank a lot and I
Hmm.
smoked a lot. I, I was as wild as you get. I was a very wild child.
Yeah. And do you think that was to do
Uh,
with your upbringing?
Absolutely. I think, because as I was saying earlier, I specialize in shadow work, and shadow work specializes in feelings. Because the one thing that's missing in this world is any education as to what feelings are for. It's absolutely missing.
So
And that is very suspect in itself.
what are feelings for?
Well, that's what I asked myself when I was 20. There was a very interesting philosopher called Bertrand Russell. And when I was in my early 20s, people around me were quite educated. And they said, there was a book he wrote, and he said, no one will ever know what comes first, thoughts or feelings. And it must have been my soul reaching through me, because I heard quite clearly within myself, you will find out.
Mm.
And I sort of heard it and laughed because I was quite young. But I went on to discover that. And that's the most interesting part of the work, is what are our feelings for? Our feelings actually tell us what we're thinking. So whether if we're thinking negative things, we will feel bad. And if we're thinking wonderful things, we'll feel good. We have two minds. We have one brain, but we have two minds. We have a reptilian brain, which houses the shadow, the ego. And we have neocortex, which houses our soul, or our authentic self.
It's
And when
interesting. Why is it called a reptilian brain?
That's interesting, isn't it?
Because, yeah.
Especially with how social media is bringing out so much about reptilian brains and etc. at the moment. So it's a fight or flight brain. So it's very reactive. And the reptilian brain, when you're in your reptilian brain, you're always in fear. But when you're in your neocortex, you're always in hope.
So if you follow spirituality and you go down the sort of alternative conspiracy route, they do talk about the reptilians or the Anunnaki or the dark forces,
Right.
all the elite, the Illuminati and whatever else, the cabal, who like are controlling everyone. And the theory is that humanity was created from apes with DNA from the stars, and you had different species. One which is the reptilians, um, who kind of messed with the DNA sort of thing. But anyway, we digress. So, what did you study to be a counselor? So, did you go to university to study counseling? And
Yeah, I absolutely did. But I mean, what you were saying just before that is absolutely right. So I mean, I do believe. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I call myself a conspiracy realist. If you are awake and you do notice what the world's like, you will know that the world is not run by good beings. And I think we are genetically modified. So there is that. And then why would we have this two aspects within us?
because
So
science calls
I
it
think there.
reptilian brain, but they also call like the royals blue-blooded, and again, that's again the reptilian sort of thing, isn't it? And so, and oftentimes they say that the divine masculine is very much like taken over by that in the Matrix.
Absolutely. The divine masculine is absolutely within his reptilian brain. The divine feminine is more aligned with her neocortex. So she's more aligned with her feelings and her intuition and her empathy. And that's the difference between the two, is that we're both operating from different mindsets, if you like.
That's why they say the
So in
divine
terms
masculine is controlled or taken over by the forces in the Matrix.
mhm, right.
So you
So
decided to study counselling. So what made you want to do that?
I think I remember a moment in time where I was really confused by people, and I never knew whether I was right or wrong. There would be upsets and things, and I always felt bad. I'd always react to how people were being, and then afterwards I'd feel bad about it. And I thought, is it me? Is it them? Is it them? Is it me? And then it came a time when I heard about counselling, and I thought, well, I really need to go and do this. I really want to understand what's happening within the human mind. I also read somewhere, we know what's going on a billion light years away in space, but we don't know what's going on 1 millimeter beneath our own skull. And I thought that was so intriguing. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and find out. There's nothing more interesting to me than humans,
Mm-hmm.
and how they are and why they behave like they are. So I took myself on that journey, and that's when it all started.
So becoming a counselor, learning the theory, and having a counselor, I guess, to work with you, did that help to prepare you for the twin flame journey?
It started me on the journey. It started me exploring the internal world. I learned a lot of theory in counseling, but actually around 2013, I had the most epic awakening. It just happened one afternoon. I was speaking to my late husband, and I'm not sure if it was the sun awakens every 11 years, and there was this massive intake of solar flares. And
Mm-hmm.
I really think it's something to do with that, and it's happening again right now.
Yes.
We're in the next, it's 11 years since this all started. So 11 years ago, I had this sudden awakening, and I just blew up. Everyone said, well, what happened to you? I said, I know the meaning of life. I know why we're here. I know who I am. I know what's happening here. I understand everything. And so I was one of the first people in my generation and
Mm-hmm.
around me to wake up. And I tried to shout from the trees, if you like, this is what's going on. But everybody was asleep. So I professed my truth, but everyone was asleep, and it was quite frustrating. In the end, I just stopped. But now Generation X have woken up,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all over it. So suddenly, I'm not alone anymore.
Were you spiritual from the get-go, or that's when your spiritual in
Yeah,
awakening?
2013. So I always believed. I can't say I consciously believed in God, but I was very aware within myself. I would unconsciously be speaking to God and thanking God and feeling connected to God on some level. But in 2013, I realized, wow, there really is a God. There really is Satan. It's really true. Because although I studied counseling and psychology, I also I've got the certificates for that. I've also studied theology, esoterics, metaphysics, and quantum mechanics. So I like to think I stand on the shoulders of giants,
Mm.
and looking at everything has got a link. If you look at all the arts, then they're actually all saying the same thing. All the cultures, if you look at humanity from all the time, from all throughout history, everyone's always believed in God.
So,
Everybody, they've never been able to dismantle that. I think Satan would probably come forward and be here, but if he showed that his face, then we would know there is God, because if there was Satan, then there would be God. So I believe that he operates from behind the scenes. And I think that's what we're really dealing with primarily, that we're involved as pawns, soldiers. Pawns is probably belittling us, but we are actors on a stage playing out the divine plan. And we have amnesia to why we came here. So when we incarnated, we came with a purpose to help God defeat the dark.
and that's the
But we're
divine.
now
That's
waking
the
up from
divine.
that sleep.
That's the divine plan, is it?
Yeah, so there is a divine plan. There's
Well,
a divine, there's a satanic plan, which you can see, which is very evident. And there's a divine plan, which is hidden and silent and only lives within the hearts of a certain percentage of humanity, I imagine.
So what is the divine
Because
plan?
the divine plan is to overcome the evil that is in the world. I think what I probably really understand from it all is that, okay, so this was a play area, if you like, on the other side, and this was an experience we could have. So I do believe fundamentally this is a sort of a simulation holodeck, and we could enter it, and as we were originally, we could come in love and create whatever we wanted to create through imagining what we wanted, and the feeling, most importantly, the feeling of having that. And that at some point was usurped by the dark. And we were bred to live in fear. We were bred to have low self-esteem. We were bred to imagine the worst scenarios. And that's the fundamental problem that we have, is that we're being encouraged through media, through education, through society, to live within our reptilian brain, which is in fear rather than in hope.
So you know the divine
And
masculine.
our job.
Sorry, carry on.
Sorry?
Carry on.
Sorry.
No, carry
So,
on.
yeah.
I've got
So,
questions, but I don't. You carry on.
no, carry on.
So you know
So, yeah, so I think
yeah.
that so I think that that's the divine plan, which is happening now. We're like the next chapter of the Bible, and I'm not a religious person by any means, and I'm actually against religion because it's been turned against us. So our spirituality lives within us, and we don't need any churches or priests or clergy to dictate to us anything. That's a false flag. But what's happening right now, there's a huge waking up in consciousness. We're waking up from the sleep that we've been in for millennia as to who we really are. And we're waking up out of this dream, the simulation that we've been in. We think that this is real, but this is a projected reality. It's not our real reality. It's not the truth of who we are, or where we're from, or why we're here. We're waking up from that. And when we understand that our feelings are telling us which mindset we're in, we can rise in consciousness. We can rise past out of this matrix, and we can return to our true sense of being.
So you know the divine masculine. How are they usurped or taken over, and why is the feminine different? Because I also feel like our divinity is kind of taken, like we're made to think we're not divine, right? So how is it affecting
Okay.
the divine masculine with their reptilian brain? Because often they act very toxic to the feminine.
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So how we're targeted is the divine masculine's feelings are shut down. The first problem with the divine masculine's feelings is that culturally and globally, men are taught that feelings are for women and to dismiss their own feelings. Right? There's a stigma attached from the birth. If a father sees a child, their son crying or being sad, dismiss their feelings straight away. Stop that. That's girls' behavior. It's not for you. You're a man. You're going to be a man, right? Stop it. They don't validate them. They not only just don't validate them, they are humiliated. The more that they show any emotion, the more the father shows disdain for them. That's culturally. They shut down their emotions. They detach from their emotions. And they're allowed to be angry because that's something that men are allowed to do by society. But it's not okay to be sad or frightened. So that's how it initially starts off for the divine masculine. So without feelings, we can't be in touch with God. We can't be in touch with who we are. We can't be. The divine feminine, on the other hand, is taught to be responsible for other people's feelings. And they're allowed to have feelings, but they don't really know what they're for. They get their validation from the divine masculine, from others, from the external world, and from making sure that everybody else is okay. So divine feminines are always trying to make sure everyone else is okay and looking for their validation. They have it's like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That's why, because we're actually conditioned right from the start to be two completely different species. Now, who actually has the power is interesting, is actually the divine feminine. Although she feels that she's the weaker one, she's actually the one who has the power. Because when she can understand not to look for validation from the external world, but to validate herself, or even if she's able to understand that she's here and loved by the universe, by God, whatever you want to call it, when she gets her validation from that and doesn't run to the divine masculine for validation, that actually eases him. The divine masculine is overwhelmed with the emotions of the divine feminine. That's what makes him run. He's never been able to understand or process his own feelings. They're all unconscious. So when the divine feminine comes on, and because we're twin flames and we're so in love with them, and it's so powerful, it's the greatest love you can have. It's not just any of the relationships he's ever had before, the karmics or the soul relationships, which would be moderate to mild. It's the twin flame one, which is absolutely huge.
So in the moderate mild soulmate karmics, is he able to be emotional with them, or is he also shut off in that relationship?
No, he's not able to be emotional with them, but he's able to tolerate it. It's not. It doesn't push him over the edge. He's still not able to function fully. He gets something from them, but he's not fulfilled because he's still not connected to him. He's still not connected to his feelings, and those relationships will never work out. That something will always go wrong with them. But it's the divine feminine relationship which is so overwhelming for him, I think, and that's what starts his spiritual journey. Because afterwards, after they separate, he can't but miss her.
So and what goes on during the separations, and I'm assuming that the divine masculine therefore has to reconnect with his emotions to return. So what journey are they going through?
I think because it's all in the 5D. So that's the 3. We're talking about the 3D, but then we're going to mention the 5D because I believe that we're the avatars of our higher self. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So with the form, and I just wanted to put some caveats. When we talk about divine feminine, divine masculine, it's just an energy, and we have both polarities within us, but more one of the other. You can disagree and chip in if you want. So when we say he, she, we don't really mean male, female. And then
no, not at all.
5D and 3D is the world around us, and 5D is like the spiritual world. Yes.
Right. Yeah, and we can incarnate in any sexuality. That's irrelevant what you're physically appearing as.
Do you agree that we have both of the energies within us, or do you feel like we have one more, or we're either one energy or the other? What do you believe? Because there's different theories.
So I don't understand the question.
Like, is the divine feminine just a feminine, or does she have a bit of masculine in her?
Well, she's got too much masculine. She's too controlling. And the divine masculine is too feminine, and he's too passive normally. So it's the controlling aspect of the divine feminine, because our shadow self is the antithesis of our true self. So in our shadow work, and when we're reacting from fear and our unconscious, that's always the antithesis of what we really are.
And it's distortion, right? So the divine feminine often asks in her distorted masculine, right?
Right, and so she's controlling, and she's chasing, and she's running, and she's wanting to control it all. And she's wanting to put everything in order, and she's wanting him to do what she wants him to do.
And the masculine is in his distorted feminine, so he's passive, and what else?
He's passive, and
Scared.
he is frightened. He's just really frightened by the level of emotions. It just makes him want to run away, because he's not in touch with his own feelings on any level. It just makes him want to run.
So what does his healing journey look like? How does he return to his emotions, and then also the feminine as well?
So that's what we were saying just before, is that's why the divine feminine is the most powerful, because as you know, we're one soul, right? So our oversoul is the one soul. So when the divine, and it's all frequency, it's all energy. We look at ourselves as that this is who we really are, but it's actually all energetic work. If you think about Nikola Tesla, he said, if you want to understand life, then you'll understand it that it's all a form of frequency and vibration. And even Einstein said everything is energy. So it's all energy work that we're doing. So when we shift, when the divine feminine shifts and takes their focus back off the divine masculine and brings it back to herself, or takes it back to God ultimately, and surrenders to the process, because everything is a divine plan. Everything is already been written. When we understand that and give our power back to God, rather than looking for it from the divine masculine, when we feel calm within ourselves and not looking for that validation. So because the divine masculine is the other half of us, it triggers him to do his ascension work. It triggers him because we pull him back into him, towards himself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what kind of work does he do then? Is it the same as the feminine, or is it different?
He starts to be, because for him, he starts missing the divine feminine. He'll run. In the beginning, he'll run and run and run and run and run.
Does he miss, when he's running, is he missing her then, or no?
He doesn't miss it. I don't think he misses her to start off with, but then gradually he starts running and realizes why he's running, and he stops. And then he keeps getting the thoughts about her. He keeps remembering her. These thoughts keep coming to him, and he does everything in his power. He could do, working all the time, or taking drugs, or drinking, or trying other relationships, trying everything to get her out of his mind. But he's unable to, because his higher self is working with him. Our higher self is working with him. He's got nowhere to run. There's no escape, because it's the divine plan, and he will come home. He will come home to his divine feminine. It takes time. That's why the separation is so important. A lot of the divine feminine do not understand how important that is, but if you can allow that time, that's the time when he realizes he really does miss her. He can't stop thinking about her, because his soul, and our soul, if you like, keeps on reminding him. The divine plan keeps on reminding him, keeps on missing. Everything that everyone says, and everything that he thinks of, and everything he notices reminds him of her.
You said you had your awakening. How did you realize all these things? Like, did you get downloads? Did you get visions? Did you do reading? Like, how did you understand all these concepts?
Okay. Well, the initial one was at 2013, and it just happened to me. So that was, I didn't do anything. I think it was always going to happen to me. I was always going to awaken. That was part of the divine plan, that I would awaken at this time, because, as I said, I think there's a small collective of us here bringing in 5D consciousness, bringing in the truth of who we really are. And I think this is the time in humanity that this was destined to happen. So that happened to me. And at that time, I thought, wow, I get it. I understand it all. It all makes sense. I've woken up. I'm healed. I'm great. And I went on. I reached a really high point. I thought I was just going to rapture and transcend the world. And I got to this really high point, which I just thought I was undefeatable. And then my husband died. And And I'm not laughing about it. And so everything was just stripped away from me. He was my soulmate, and I still love him. And he thought I was his twin flame. He called me his Bashert, which he was Jewish. And so, and we had an incredible bond, but we had such problems because of our shadow stuff. We had a really tumultuous marriage. So when he passed, I went through another dark night. And there's many dark nights of the soul. There isn't just one dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And so I went through another dark night of the soul where I felt guilty and bad because of all the arguments we had and this and that. And then I got through that because God was always with me. I got through that. I understood all that. And I had faith in God that there was a reason for me still to be here, and there was a reason to carry on. Although everything seemed so dark, financially, relationships, my children, just being alone, felt abandoned. My whole life, it's just been disaster after disaster after disaster. And, I was like, why? But then I had the spiritual awakening, and I realized because I'm one of these people that's bringing in this new knowledge, I've been super attacked all my life because the dark don't want me to be here. I'm very unwelcome. We all are.
They don't want you to ascend.
So that happened, but then meeting my twin.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
When meeting my twin, I realized I hadn't done half the shadow work I thought I'd done.
That was the same for me. When I met my twin, I was like, oh yeah, I'm 98% of the time I'm happy. I have a great life. And then it was like, oh crap.
Yeah, I thought I was so ascended. Oh God. And the universe has a real sure way of putting you in your place. So I met him through a mutual friend, and we talked, and he said that the moment he heard my voice, his knees went weak, and he had to sit down because he thought he was going to collapse. It's the tone of our voices.
The voice is very important, as is the eye contact.
Yeah, it's the eyes and the voice.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Yeah, the eyes and the voice. And his voice, I can't remember anybody's voices, but I can always remember him ringing me and saying, hello, my love, how are you? I can hear that again and again and again. His voice is the most magical, mystical, and enticing thing I've ever heard in my entire life. The resonance between us. We started talking. We had a session, and we weren't supposed to speak to the next week. And he was the runner to start off with. And so I just can't take another week without speaking to you. I know this may seem inappropriate because he is very English, and he's very correct. He's very nerdy.
Proper. Yeah.
Very proper. And he's 13 years younger than me. And I'm a wild, crazy hippie. I was, we couldn't be any more opposite.
So is he quite logical then, quite scientific?
Very left brain, I'm very light brain. So we're either exactly the same on everything, or we're complete opposites. And then on everything. And we spoke and we spoke and we spoke for 6 hours. The first time, once we realized, the first night that we realized we really cared for each other, we spoke for 13 hours. And then after that, it was 6 hours every night.
Yeah.
And the coincidences and the synchronicities and the similarities were just off the scale. Everything, like we'd say, my hobby is photography, his hobby was photography. What's your favorite ice cream? Pistachio. What's your favorite cartoon? Roadrunner. They're very select things, and we were exactly on the page. But the thing which I really knew, I'd had a spiritual experience around 2013, 14, where I joined a group of spiritual people meditating, and I had this incredible experience where all of a sudden, suddenly I was sitting in front of Jesus. I've only had this experience once. And I saw him, and he had the most beautiful face I've ever seen in my life. It was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I never wanted to look away from his face. And he just smiled at me, and there's no words to describe how beautiful that was. And then the next minute, Jesus was standing by an open glass door, and there was a beautiful field in front of him. And he looked back at me, and he put his hand towards me. He offered his hand towards me and said, "Follow me." And I was too humbled and overwhelmed. Thought, who am I to follow you? And I couldn't, because I just felt so I felt so overwhelmed that I wasn't worthy. He smiled at me and walked through the door. And then my twin said, I didn't tell my twin this. Hadn't told my twin this. And I said, "Did you have have you had any spiritual experiences?" And he said, "I did once. I saw Jesus. His face was really beautiful. And he put his hand out to me and said, 'Follow me.'" I was like, seriously?
Wait, Deryn, do they also have the same spiritual experiences, do you think?
Well, that's why one was completely one-off. And as I said, I'm 63. I've never heard anyone say anything like that. And he had exactly the same.
Because I've also met the Ascended Masters, right? And I'm wondering, then would that mean my twin flame would have done?
Be interesting question, wouldn't it?
And then what about the journey with the twin flame, the running, the chasing, and all that stuff? Like, you've only been on the journey for a year, but you've done really well.
It was wonderful. He loved me. He was chasing me. It was everything. He wanted to marry me. And we met, we were physical. We had, saw him, maybe 4 or 5 times. We had relations, and I just, when I think of him, I just think about, it's just the most beautiful creature that God ever made. And I never felt that about anybody.
And the intimacy that you have with them, I don't know if you want to touch upon that, because some people say that, they confuse twin flames with soulmates, right? So can you make a point on how it's very different?
I'm not sure. He was more, I'm trying to phrase this the right way. He was, I think he was watching a lot of porn, and he was interested in doing a lot of sort of wild things, which was out of my comfort zone, and I would never ever have done. But because it was him, I went along with it. And it's just like, it's so like looking back, and it was completely natural, because I just wanted to make him happy, and it didn't feel uncomfortable at all.
You feel safe. You feel safe.
Being with him was just wonderful, and looking at him and touching him, and it was good, and we both enjoyed it.
But it's not like a regular experience. It's different.
It's not regular sex. It's just not. It's so ethereal. You can just feel it. You're not just making love. There's something so much more going on than sex.
Do you not find it's very innocent and very safe, and also very spiritual?
Yeah.
It's very pure.
It was just, we just felt like 2 children.
Yes.
It felt like we were just 2 children.
Yeah.
He just seemed so little, and I felt so little. It felt like we were 7.
I felt very shy. I don't know about you, but I felt I felt like a virgin.
I was beyond anxious when he was here, or when I was at his place. Because I was in that time before the separation, where I hadn't worked through all this process, but I was beyond anxious all the time, and he picked up on that. But it was very special, and it was very, very beautiful. And then I just felt like he was distancing. There were just less texts, less phone calls. And that brought my anxiety right to the fore.
Was he triggered? That's why he was separating, or overwhelmed?
That's what I understand now, is because it was so much love.
Yeah.
The feelings were so intense, and he didn't know how to process them. And he said to me one time, he says, "No one's ever loved me like this. This love is so big." And at the time I thought, that's wonderful. But then I realized he wasn't actually saying it in a positive way.
And they don't feel like they deserve it, I think.
Apparently they don't, because they've got very low self-esteem. So deep down they do. But to me, he is the most incredible person ever. I mean, on a 3D level, he's a doctor. He's got his PhD. He's absolutely gorgeous to look at. He's got the heart of a lion. He's the most beautifully sensitive, and he loves nature and arts and everything. He was exquisite in every way. So I couldn't see why he didn't feel this low self-esteem, because that was all buried in his shadow.
Is that all childhood stuff? Because I feel like my one also, you wouldn't think, right? But then it's all hidden. But is that all childhood trauma?
It's all childhood trauma, and it's all to do with the parents and what happened with the parents. So for mine, for my twin flame, his father was narcissistic and his mother was an inverted narcissist. That means his father had an aggressive shadow and the mother had an inverted shadow, a victim, if you like. So that's when he observed that the whole time. And he always felt the responsibility to take care of his mother. So he denied his own emotions, but projected his feelings into his mother and was always looking out for his mother, but at the same time, probably angry with that situation. So this was all going on, and he probably didn't really trust relationships because of what he witnessed. So all that's going on, all that happened as a child, all that happens to us before the age of 7 forms our shadow self, our unconscious self. And unless we actually deal with that, unless we look at those feelings and how we're feeling,
so
then we can't heal.
Let's talk a bit about the shadow work then. How do you heal that?
Okay. So I think my greatest realization is that thoughts and feelings are one. You can't have a thought without having a feeling. So if you think about something that happened to you in your life, when you lost someone, then you automatically feel sad. If you think about a dragonfly flying over a pond, you'll feel good. If you think about an old person crossing a road and all the traffic being fast, you can sort of feel their anxiety. There's nothing you can think about that doesn't immediately create an emotion, a feeling. Right? So in shadow work, so people, they don't know what to do with their feelings, and the people are taking masses of medication and everything to stop their feelings. It's not the feelings. Okay, so your neocortex, your soul, your authentic self communicates via feelings, and your shadow self communicates through intrusive thoughts. So if you have an intrusive thought that's coming from your reptilian mind, it will cause you a negative emotion. The 3 negative emotions are anxiety, sadness, and anger, right? And then there's all sorts of emotions that come off those 3. So anger, you might be irritated or frustrated, and anxiety, you might be fearful or worried. So the different emotions. But once you start getting in touch with how you feel, then you can identify those thoughts. Now, a child before the age of 7 is just pure imagination. We don't reach critical thinking till after the age of 7. Up to the age of 7, we're actually in theta brainwave, which is purely belief. We believe everything that we're told. We don't question anything. Someone says you're an idiot, you think you're an idiot. Also, children always think everything's their fault, just by nature, by default. Anything that's going on in the family, they think it's their fault. So we internalize all that. We internalize all that into our unconscious and into our shadow. Now, you might be going out somewhere today and then you might feel anxious about it. There's no real rational reason to be. But the shadow is not rational, it's irrational and intrusive. So you might think, well, if I go there, that person might be there and they might say this. Then what I do in my work is I question, are you really thinking or are you really imagining? If you're really imagining, I'm actually imagining. And I think that the way the education system has been set up, it's been set up for us to believe that we're thinking all the time. And actually, we're beings of emotion. We're beings of imagination. So when we start challenging, is that a thought or is that imagination? And what am I feeling about it? Then when you have a negative emotion and you question the thought or the imagination behind it, you can track it back to childhood. When you track it back to childhood, you can see something happened at that time which usurped and took away part of your authentic self and trapped it into your inner child, which has been stuck there in the past and is replaying and replaying and replaying that scenario again and again and again, and projecting that onto every single person you meet.
Can we talk about the inner child? Because I did a workshop last week at work on the inner child, and someone was like, "Oh, it's very new agey," but it's actually from psychology, right? And it's quite an old modality. So, what is the inner child, and why does it stay there, and how do we like work with it?
Well, I think we actually are the inner child. You know, we have all the experiences on the world and we think, well, now we're an adult. I don't know. I don't know about you, but I've never felt like an adult.
Mm,
I've always felt, and I'm happiest when I'm my child. I'm happiest if I'm blowing bubbles or I see a dragonfly or
mm,
something makes me laugh and or in awe of something or something uh, something delightful happens. I feel like I'm always the child, and I always want to stay being the child. And I think the world makes us feel that we've got to be an adult now. We've got to do our adulting. We've got to do these things. But the child is always alive, and I think we've moved away from the child. I think
mm,
it's about returning to that rather than being serious and not laughing. I mean, where's laughter gone? People have just
mm,
stopped laughing.
mhm,
I just realized that the other day. It's the inner child is our glory. It's who we are. It's the beauty within us. It's the aspect that was created by God within us. It's how we arrive. When you look at children, why we love being with children is because they're so spontaneous and happy and joyful. And as you look at people as they get older, they become more cynical.
yeah.
So, do we want to become like that, or would we rather be more childlike?
So during your separation period, what sort of inner work were you doing? Is it the similar sort of stuff that you teach now to others?
Yeah, well, thank goodness I did the work I did. I guess it's not a coincidence, but
Yeah.
as I said, I thought I got past all my shadow stuff, but I didn't. And then I just realized how anxious I was. So the first thing I realized is how anxious I was, and I was giving all my validation over to my twin flame. And at some point, I just realized somehow, spiritually, internally, some process, maybe even things that he said, you know, because he also believes in God. Um, that something was just really, really not right with me. I hadn't smoked or drank for about 20 years, and I'd started drinking and smoking, and I just thought I'm just going off the rails with this.
Yeah.
Everything that I was teaching and coaching, I was doing the opposite of it. And
Yeah.
I felt like such a hypocrite. I was, what's going on? And then I started realizing that I was looking to him to validate who I was.
Mm,
So I started stepping back from that, and I actually let him go. One day I said to him, he was getting really ill and not well, and just not okay with himself. And I just think, maybe we should give our relationship a break. Maybe it's too much for you. And he jumped at the chance, as runners would. And then I couldn't believe I'd said that. I said it, but regretted it, but realized it was my soul pushing for the separation. So then I went through the dark night of the soul, and I was just beside myself with grief and sorrow, and cried and cried and cried. And then I realized it was sadness. I was feeling so sad. But then I had another epiphany, like I had back in 2013, and I realized, uh, so, so I realized that anxiety is actually imagining the worst scenario.
mm,
So I was imagining the worst scenario. And there's a divine plan. So there's so much of this to take in, to say, express at one time, but because I understood God's perspective at that time was that there's a reason for my life and a reason for me to be here, and the best was yet to come. So it was my reptilian mind that was imagining the worst. But if I would take it to God, he'd say the best is yet to come. Imagine the best, not the worst.
Yeah.
I realized I had really low self-esteem, but then because I took it to God, he gave me all the esteem, because you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here now doing all these things, understanding all these things for no reason whatsoever.
So
And
Deryn,
the sadness, and the last thing was the sadness, and I realized I was so sad. And then again, I got the best is yet to come. Hand everything to me. Surrender everything. I have a plan for you. It's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you. Plans for a hope and a future.
so
And to be
Deryn,
still and not to have fear. The fundamental thing was to fear not. 365 times it's mentioned in the Bible. Fear not. So if you're not to fear not, what's the opposite of fearing? Is to be hopeful. So, and if it's all imagination, which I think we're in this holodeck of imagination, if we're to imagine, and if we're going to imagine, why should we imagine the worst? Why not imagine the best? So that's where I got to.
It is the fear that takes over. Oh my god, and it's all just an illusion. But I was gonna say, like, sometimes, well, quite often, I feel the divine feminine has some sort of tools in her bag that she uses to use to heal, right? Or they've done various sort of like courses beforehand to prep them. But the divine masculine, I don't know what kind of things they have in their basket of tricks. How do they navigate the journey alone?
You see, we go back to what we said earlier. I think the divine feminine is doing the work.
Mm.
Because we are this one soul. And as we step ahead, we pull them along.
So they don't do any work then.
They do the work. What happens is we take one step forward, we take 2 steps forward, and they take 1 step forward. They take 2 steps forward, and they take 1 step forward. So remember, it's not just us here, right? Okay. So this is my understanding. So we have our higher self, and they're on the other side. So you and me and everyone here, we're not actually really here. We're just projecting our consciousness, 1% of our consciousness into this avatar.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're a projection of ourselves. So you have to understand who we are, what we're in, why we're here. These are the 3 fundamental questions, right? Why are we here? And who are we? And what are we doing here? What's going to happen, right? So my answer to that is we're in a spiritual war. This place got hijacked. God's coming to get it back. We volunteered to incarnate here, to bring this consciousness in now, to raise everyone up, raise this frequency, help the collective unconscious, and return everybody home. So we're all on the other side. So as we're on the other side, my higher self and your higher self is always whispering to us via our feelings, right? So we're always getting this input via our feelings. We're always having this intuition. The more we're still, the more we don't run around in the world doing things all the time, the more we're still and are able to stay in this present moment. If you want to read more of Eckhart Tolle, that's a great guy to understand the power of being here now. Because when you're here, right here in this second, right now, you can feel what you feel, and you can see what you're thinking or imagining. That's why the power of now is really, really important.
Mm. And then
So
you know the divine masculine. Does he understand it that way spiritually? Does he get it as well?
no, I don't think so yet. But there gets to a point as the divine female, because we're connected on some ethereal connections, we're the same soul split into 2. There's nothing that one can do that the other one doesn't feel the impact of.
Mm.
So if I'm going to run ahead in my ascension, it's going to affect him. He has to come along. He's like on a lead. I don't mean to say it like that, but it's like a dog on a lead. He has to come with me. So if we want our divine masculine to join us in the 3D, we must run along as quick as we can into the 5D and understand the overall perspective of what's going on here and who we are, and relinquish all our anxieties, sadness, fears, low self-esteem, and understand who we really are, and be in great joy that we're here right this minute doing what we're doing. When we do that, we're leaping ahead, and they have no choice whatsoever but to come along. And at that right time, when we are in union with our higher self, when we see ourselves here, this 3D version, when we see ourselves as our 5D sees us, from the perspective of the 5D, as a 5D perspective, I came here at this time for this particular reason, to help humanity evolve into the 5D. When we understand that perspective that the 5D holds, and we're in union with our 5D, it's over, game over. that's what I'm hoping for, because I'm still in separation.
Yeah, what is your current situation that you have, and any advice and tips you have?
So my current situation is that we're in separation. We spoke about 2 weeks ago. He's been on holiday. He sent me a text last week. But my union now is with 5D. So I feel the 5D around me often. I will listen to a song will come on, I'll walk in a supermarket or something like that, and a song will come on, and I'll know it's so pertinent to who we are.
Yes.
There's a song by Queen, One Soul, One Thing. What's that song? That came on. We're one soul.
It's all the manifestations are fast as well when you're in union, in a union. It's just crazy. The synchronicities, the dream signs, everything. Life flows. I find that everything just works out like clockwork.
Right. Yeah. And I can feel, I have this, I don't know if it's clairsentient or whatever, but I can actually feel him with me emotionally. I'll think of something. I thought about him the other day, and when we were physical, and I can, and I have no words to really describe this, but I've had this ability since 2013. I can feel spirit, so I can actually feel his presence in my heart.
Yeah.
But yesterday, because I'm now really conscious of the 5D twin flame being around me, I speak to him and I said, how does the 3D version feel about me today? And it was so interesting, because I hadn't even finished the thought when the answer came, well, I sent you that song yesterday. And I was absolutely taken aback and amazed. It's so magical, because I hadn't even finished the thought. And I realized how aligned now I was with the 5D. And I thought, well, this is really exciting. I'm going to be hearing from this guy any day now.
I have constant conversations with my 5D version. But any advice and tips, any closing messages you have?
Just God has a plan for a higher timeline with our twin flame, and talk to the twin. Talk to your twin, stay present, stay grateful, stay appreciative. That's the thing to keep you out of the lower matrix. Is always fear and anxiety and depression and all this. And the way to keep out of that is to stay grateful. Know there's a purpose for yourself. Know that you haven't met your twin for any random reason. Although it's been really painful, it's to raise your consciousness. It's for you to really understand who you really are, and that love is eternal. It's forever. It always was. It always will be. We're just separated for these few moments here while we're on Earth. We came together. We jumped into this together, and we jumped into this together to help everybody. And as long as we stay true and grateful and imagining the best, we will be reunited.
Well, listen, I've had a wonderful time listening to you. And I do urge people to work with Deryn, especially on shadow work and any sort of counseling and coaching, because you are a wealth of information. You are so fascinating to listen to. Maybe we'll have to do another one soon. But thank you so much, Deryn.
Thanks, it was great fun, Manny.
It was amazing. And you were saying that the doorbell might happen and the dishwasher might be delivered, but it hasn't yet. So that's fine.
We haven't, no.
But I'll
The
put all
universe is
the
on our side.
I'll put all the links in the chat. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manny.